is I'm going to give you a piece of paper that you're actually going to work on with your small groups, because you guys have done this before in Algebra 2. You have also done this in geometry, and some of the things like Pythagorean theorem you have done before in classes previous to geometry. So you're probably pretty good at right triangle trigonometry and special right triangles. It's just one of those things, again, we need to call it back to the front of our memory. But one thing we want to do together is talk about how to use a calculator to evaluate trig functions. Okay, so if you have your calculator out, and you can have a graphing calculator or a scientific calculator. I'm going to pull my calculator up here as well. When I look at those three problems, this kind of goes back to that question that Carrie asked me on the homework about, like, would I take off for not labeling radians? But notice when you look at those, and I'm asking you to do cosine of pi over 4, secant of 0.75, cotangent of 2.73, we're going to assume those are all in what unit? Radians, because it doesn't say degrees. So if you're doing one of the trig functions in a calculator and you are using radians, you need to change the mode of your calculator. So if everybody would, next to their second button, find the mode button. That's the button you want to click first. If you're using a scientific calculator, your button is in the same location. It's just labeled DRG. Okay. And then on our graphing calculators, if you look at that menu that pops up, about 3 lines down, you have the options between degrees and radians. So I think the TIs are actually set to radians as default. Okay, so most of you, if you've never gone into the mode before, it's probably on radians. And so you want it to be, if you wanted to change it into degrees, you just move your arrow buttons, and then when you get to degree, hit enter, and then you can quit, and it'll be in degree mode. But we actually want to be in the radian mode. Okay, so to get out of the mode, just hit second mode, because that says quit above it. So second mode will get you out of that. Okay. So make sure you're in the right mode. If you're doing problems later on and they're in degrees and you want to do like sine, cosine, tangent of a degree, you need to remember to go back and change the mode in your calculator. Also beware if you are taking, I know like physics, at some point you guys do some trig work. I think most of the time you're working in degrees, so then you need to change your calculator back to that other class. And then when you come here, if we're doing radians work, you have to change it back. So remember that mode is there and that there are 2 different modes. So now that we're all in radian mode, we can just type in cosine of pi over 4. You do also have a pi button if you didn't know that. Our pi button, if you do second and the exponent button, that'll pull up a pi. You should be able to find it on one of your keys if you're using a scientific calculator. And then do pi divided by 4. You could close the parentheses for good measure here, but it will also calculate correctly if you don't close the parentheses. You should get something like 0.707. That's a cosine of pi over 4. Are we all okay with that? Getting the same decimal? Let me know if you're not. No? Yes, it is. If you want to know a decimal for a degree, you use reset. So if you click that, you can use it. And like vice versa, I think you can go back to it. Okay, anybody else?
How do you get the pi?
Second, and then the like exponent button right above division. It has a little pi on it. You should see it. Okay, now, if I ask you to do the last 2, like secant and cotangent, we'll have one issue, right? There is no button for secant or cotangent. So you have to rely on your knowledge about the ratios for secant and cotangent. So does anybody remember anything about either one? Emily?
Forgot what I was going to say.
You want me to go to Ethan? Ethan?
Aren't they like inverses of each other? Like cosine or secant to sine and something like that, so you like divide by 1.
Okay. Can you do one specifically for me? Pick one of them that you think you're.
Like, you do, for secant, you do sine of 0.75 being divided by 1.
If you divide it by 1, then.
Would you use the 1 over exponent?
Isn't that just sine of 0.75?
Oh my lord, you're right.
Okay. Nick, your thoughts?
Is secant for cosine or?
Yes.
Okay. So it'd be 1 over cosine of 0.75.
Okay, so even just as an FYI, right, the weird thing about sine, cosine, and secant, cosecant is that they mismatch. So the reciprocal to sine is cosecant, and the reciprocal to cosine is secant. So this is actually a cosine. And you were on the right track. You had done sine divided by 1, but you actually want to flip that so that it's the reciprocal, right? So Nick gave us 1 divided by cosine of 0.75. Okay. So what I want to caution you against is when you're trying to do secant and cotangent and cosecant, do not use the second button on the calculator and call up inverse sine, inverse cosine, inverse tangent. Those things are not the same thing as reciprocals. Okay, we'll eventually use those, but for right now you would just use the reciprocal. So flip it. 1 divided by the cosine of 0.75. Okay, and you should get something like 1.367. We okay with that? And then for cotangent, what would you do? 1 divided by tangent. 2.73. Yeah, negative 2.291. Yeah. So that's something that we'll eventually talk about probably as we get closer to like section 4.4 and 4.5 when we're graphing in terms of like the domain and the range. And you might already know a little bit about like domain and range, like what kind of numbers can you get out for sine and cosine, what kind of numbers can you get out for tangent. Those are a little bit different, but we'll actually get to those when we do graphing. But yeah, that's okay that it's negative. Okay, everybody okay with that? Okay, so the next thing that you're going to do is I'm going to give you a green piece of paper, and you are going to work through the green piece of paper using your small group, so utilize your group members. Okay. On the front side, you're going to answer the questions that are there. The first question is basically like notes that I would give you, but you already know this stuff, so I'm not going to bore you. And then the second one is an example of how you can use those things to then answer questions using trig ratios. On the back side of the green sheet, it's blank, but what I would like you to do with your group members is copy down the special right triangles. There are 2 of them, they're special, and label their sides. Okay? And then once the group has kind of come to consensus, send one person from your group to me with the green sheet, and I will check it over and see if I agree with it, and then you can get started on the homework assignment. So the rest of the class will be your time to work on your homework. So pretty nice day today for you. So again, come up and see me. I'll also at the end pass around a tape dispenser, or you can grab a piece of tape when your group gets okay and maybe like tape this into your notebook. I would tape it so that I could flip it up so I could see the back side. And Jacob, while you were gone, we did do a little bit of notes about using a calculator. So make sure that you kind of talk to your group members about how to use a calculator.
I know. We use right triangle trigonometry, there's a lot.
Okay, there is, if you're doing radians, you're going to need to change the mode, so make sure you're okay with that.